Welcome to Shop Talk Live. This episode is sponsored by the Melbourne Tool Company. And as always, whenever we bring you a sponsored episode at Shop Talk Live, we want it to be something that is packed with information and interesting conversations. And this episode is absolutely full of both. Today, we're going to be talking to Hague Haswell from Melbourne Tool Company about the history of MTC's products. And we're also going to be talking to Vic Tesolin, who we always know from this show as a co-host, but today Vic is going to be talking as brand ambassador of Melbourne Tool Company. And as always, he's got some incredible insights about the process as well. So it's a fun conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it.
We're in the womb of Ben Strano and Vic Tesolin.
Funnily enough, and I mean, if we could chuck this in the recording. I mean,
well, that was the intro just there.
All right. Well, this is perfect then. Because last year we did an event called Wood Dust in Melbourne, and there was like Jimmy, April, Matt, and myself, and we were kind of like, we were just like touring around and going to like a few of the classes and stuff. And we ended up having a few like D&Ms. Like I remember specifically at this Lebanese bakery, like, you know, kind of had like a really kind of deep and meaningful conversation. And as we're driving back to Timbercon, you know, I just, you know, flippantly kind of said, you know, like now we've got the circle of trust. You know, it can only occur when the four of us are together in the one space, but now we've got this circle of trust. And we all kind of had a bit of a laugh about that. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm part of a circle of trust with like Jimmy DeResta, April Wilkinson, and, you know, and Matt Esley. And it's like, you know, I'm just the chauffeur in that situation. It was great.
Well, this is a new circle. It's bigger because it's including all of our listeners, but
that's true.
They know not to tell anyone.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly right. I think I'm going to get in trouble with this because if any of the other three watch this, they're going to be like, he broke the circle, you know?
The first thing about the circle of trust is don't talk about the circle of trust.
Right. It's
exactly
like Fight
right.
Club.
Exactly
right.
Oh,
see, there, I just blew it.
The makeup on your face hiding that bruise, though, Vic, I mean, that's
right.
That's classy work.
Yeah, in our Fight Club, there's no face shots.
Oh, right. Okay. Got to keep it pretty.
Yeah, clearly.
It's really just like picking up a blade and dropping it on a concrete floor.
Right.
Until someone says that's enough.
I give.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, the most important thing here is explain to everyone how to say the town or the city that your tool company is named after.
Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I had no clue until Vic did a post one time of like all of your entire crew saying Melbourne. And I was like, that I've been saying that wrong my whole life. So,
well, Australians, I mean, we're very efficient with our use of language. So, you know, like when we say because people are like, what you're saying, like what's But in North America is R. But like, there's an extra little piece of effort that you have to put in to kind of get that hook over the top of the R.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, we're just trying to conserve energy. It's hot down here, you know.
You've got stuff to do.
There's so many animals to fight and that are trying to kill
exactly
you.
Right. Exactly right. Skippy. So we just kind of tend to we tend to kind of just like steamroll our way over a few letters. So like Australia is Australia. So we kind of skip the R and skip the L and just, you know, kind of just steamroll over it, you know?
Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna start dropping random letters out of everything that we say, and I'll fit right in.
Imagine what you would sound like if you had been breathing in ether. That's what happens. It just
okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. So hey, you had mentioned Timbercon. Can you fill in the North American listeners, which is primarily our listenership? What is Timbecon?
Timbercon's a woodworking retailer. So it started in '89 as a family business. It mostly actually started off selling timber, and it had kind of like a small tools section. that I think was mainly just driven by customer requests. And so I kind of started off with that. Got a bit of machinery in there. I think over the years, the model flipped. So early 2000s, I think, was when, it was really kind of flipping from one form of business into another. The family sold in 2007. And so we all got out of the industry and then came back into it again. Like, I came back into it on my own, late 2014. And basically rebooted the business. And from there, we didn't really get into the timber side of things. It was primarily, it was kind of a space issue because I already was operating another business in a building, and there was no way of kind of fitting timber as well as, tools and machinery into the building. And so we haven't really kind of looked at going back to stock timber again. But it's been 9 years. And so do a fairly full range of tools, machinery, accessories, hand tools, industrial tooling.
How many locations are there?
Melbourne and Perth at this stage.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right on. So, so how does Melbourne Tool Company, I feel silly saying it that way, I'm sorry. How does MTC fit into the mix?
Well, I suppose it really started around about 2019. We were finding that there was a fairly big gap between supply and demand of premium hand planes. So you've kind of got the big North American brands. There's the Chinese brand called Lubin or Hongsheng. They've all had supply problems over the years, and it kind of got to a point where we just couldn't get enough supply for ourselves. And so we kind of thought, well, we already get a lot of products out of China and Taiwan. Some of them are proprietary products that we've had developed from the get-go. So we thought we'd probably do a similar thing with hand planes. And that's really where it started from. We started working on it and very quickly realized that it wasn't as simple as just going, hey, let's just make a hand plane. Even though they look relatively simple and I guess from the MTC point of view, like a low angle plane is fairly simple to use, it's actually quite difficult to get them manufactured correctly. And so we more or less found out very early on that we had to have the in-house knowledge to be able to get them manufactured to the quality level that we wanted to. And so in the very beginning, we contracted a furniture designer called Alexandra Pontonio. And she works as a furniture designer, has an industrial design degree. And we engaged with her to basically do the contract work to develop the planes. And so the block plane and the bench plane aesthetic, for want of a better way of describing it, that was very much her development. We got to the block plane and the low angle jack plane, the end of that development process with those two planes with her. But we found that that was kind of leading into COVID. There were restrictions. There was Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world. We couldn't meet regularly. It was very difficult. She was also very much on the ascent from her point of view with her furniture making. And so she was very, very time poor. And I guess the time that it was taking to do the development, we thought, well, let's just bring somebody on full-time in-house to accelerate the process. And so Rowan, who's now the full-time designer and has done, the full range of MTC, he started, I think, in about 2021. And, then went through and, finished off the development of the other two bench planes and then did the other 5 models.
This is very young. I mean, that seems like that's hauling to get products designed, tooled up, and out. You're not messing around.
Well,
that's all the drop letters.
Yeah.
I would have, yeah. So Rowan is the designer, of the hand planes. Cause this isn't, Vic, you can, well, first off, Vic, you're speaking right now as an employee of MTC, right?
Well, not really. I'm a contractor, but yeah. Oh, okay. So Hague, like when I met Hague, this is before any of this, and I was going to Australia to teach, and I was doing various events and got to meet Hague, and then we sort of just kept this relationship up, and then when he had announced that he was going to try some planes, I thought, oh, that's super cool, and then he actually did it, which was because like everybody wants to make a hand plane.
Well, I love the fact that you use the term "announced." Like there was, I climbed up on this rock and pronounced to the world, we are doing hand planes.
And so. Well, I mean, it wasn't really a pronouncement in that sense, but I mean, we were having conversations, and then and then all of a sudden these planes show up, and Hague is like, "Hey, do you want to try these out and tell me what you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so these planes showed up, and I was all like, if I'm being honest, I was not like thinking that it was going to be all that great, and so I said, well, I'm going to check them out. So I started playing with them and I started using them, and I did the old, like, I always pull things out of the box, sharpen the blade, give it a shot, right?
Okay. Yeah.
See if there's anything that I have to do in order to try to, soup it up. I didn't need to do that. And so the plane worked out of the box, and I was a little bit shocked because I wasn't expecting that. And so we kind of have this running joke how that we could get a t-shirt that says something like, MTC, these tools aren't crap. Because I was kind of expecting it to be, but it wasn't. And I'm sure like Hague can, speak a little bit more to sort of the manufacturing process. But I mean, we know that we can get good quality products out of, overseas. I mean, this whole podcast is put together with them. And so Hague can speak to that a little bit more, but yeah, like it came at a perfect time, I think, when a lot of places in the world, North America is included, there's no middle of the line.
Yeah.
When it came to hand planes, right? You either had the choice of buying the premium brands, and great if you can do that. But then the other options were not great. I mean, yes, you can soup up a Stanley to make it, work well enough. Or you had to buy a plane-like object.
There's only so many kind of secondhand Stanleys that are available, and you start looking at the supply and demand of those. And the reason that you can't easily find a secondhand Stanley is because that's kind of the other option, and that's that demand kind of just soaking up that secondary market.
Well, and that's no joke. I have a friend who is a fairly substantial antique tool dealer, and he even says, he goes, I can't bring myself to charge like $90 for a number 4. So I can't keep them in stock because he puts them up for like $60 or something, and they're immediately gone. He sells them as fast as he gets them. And but the thing about the MTC planes that I initially noticed, because Vic was up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and my wife and I went up to have dinner with him and Andrea, and I started playing with him, and like I thought I knew what I was going to be handling when I picked him up, and it was like, oh no, this is totally different. You really didn't use that copy paste button, No. What's that process like?
Well, that very much in the beginning, it came out of the opposite ends of the spectrum of like Alex and myself. So Alex, to be polite, she's probably about like 5'2", okay. and like she may even be shorter than that. And I think I'm like 6'4.5", and like I don't have like the world's biggest hands, but you kind of had two people that were sitting there having this, and like there were other people involved in the conversation. There's like the two of us having this conversation about, do you like this? Do you like how it feels in your hand, or is it comfortable for you? And so we became the two people at the opposite ends of the spectrum where it kind of had to pass our test, because if you're 5'10" or whatever, and you got like normal size hands, you can kind of design pretty much anything. It's like that, going and buying a large shirt from a retailer, you can always get that. But like when you're like an extra small or a 3XL, it becomes a lot harder kind of finding the t-shirt that fits. And so when because, like with a plane, how many different ways can you design like a blade being held at a certain angle and having all of the stuff that's around it, right? Like, I mean, where's the innovation? And I suppose, I mean, there are kind of innovations that you can put into the tools, but I suppose the issue with like innovations, in some respects, it kind of comes at a cost. So if you kind of have if you try and bring in an innovation, it's usually adding complexity and therefore it's adding cost, and it kind of misses the point of what we were trying to achieve. And so we very much came from the point of view of ergonomics, for want of a better way of talking about it. And so, I remember spending like hours like talking about how heavy the low angle jack plane was. And it was like, we liked it because it was heavy, but then we're like, when people are using it for an extended period of time, are they going to get tired using it? And then we kind of landed on the people aren't going to be using it for an extended period of time. There's the benefit of having that extra mass that's kind of going down onto the work that you don't have to press down with. And so it's going to make the efforts easier when you're using a heavier low angle jack plane. Mm-hmm. And when it came to like the handles, we had, I don't know, 12 or 15 different handle shapes and sizes that we're trying to, we were going through and testing out. And then the same with the front knobs, you'd never think that like a front knob would be that technically complex, but kind of getting the right one for an Alex and a Hague, and it suiting both of us, it was kind of where all of that came from, so it was kind of a happy accident that we just had, two people at opposite ends of the spectrum in the same room trying to do this,
Yeah. Now, Vic, you've witnessed a lot of people put their hands on them, has that been a universal theme of ergonomics when people are trying them?
It's, so the two biggest ones that I find, is the block plane and the spoke shaves. And so when people pick up the block plane, they're immediately shocked at how much it weighs. And block planes are one of those funny tools that you sort of have in an all-around kung fu grip as you use it. And having that extra mass come to bear on what you're working on, and then having a little bit of momentum as you push it is quite nice. And then, of course, the spoke shaves, same thing. They have a little bit of extra mass to them because they're cast. The handles are cast, and then the cork inlay to give it a little bit of.
Oh, I don't think I put it together that the handles are integral.
Yeah, they're cast.
Wow,
casting.
It's all one piece casting. And the issue that you've got is like underneath the cork handle, there's actually a ribbing that you obviously can't see that stabilizes the casting, right? Because there's kind of like an issue of the shape of that spoke shave holding its form. And the easiest way of solving that problem was by casting a ribbing into it. But the way we ended up kind of coming up with the cork was, and this was, where the Rowan side of things came in. We were originally planning on putting the maple inlays in there to match the rest of the range. And so it was kind of like it kind of had this aesthetic that kind of ran all the way through, because we couldn't have solid cast handles because the weight of the spoke shave would then be too high, and then it just wouldn't, from a spoke shave design point of view, it wouldn't work. Okay. We actually were trying to take a lot of weight out of the spoke shaves for the exact same reason that we're trying to put weight into, say, like the block planes and the jack planes. So we're trying to take the weight out. And it was just, we're finding it really hard to be able to shape the maple, to be able to pop them in. And I think like Rowan just had like a, reusable coffee cup with like a cork ring around it. He's like, we should just try using cork. And we're like, oh, that's cool because it's kind of springy and, kind of like it fits into the hand and everything. And and so that's where the cork idea came from. But it was very much, we've got to take the weight out of it. We've got to have these ribs. We've also got to have something that kind of fills in the space. And the cork came to be.
But the thing about the spoke shaves that I was really taken with was the curve of the curved bottom spoke shave. How many iterations did that go through? Because most curved bottom spoke shaves, in my experience, are more aggressively curved, I think, and harder to drive, if you will. Like you kind of gotta get that learning curve going with a curved bottom spoke shave. And when I was playing with the curved bottom spoke shave, it was just enough to know that you're going to be able to get in and out, but it felt like a flat bottom shave.
Amazingly, that just kind of happened pretty much first time round.
Okay.
Yeah, probably, there's probably a bit of a build up there. Like, how many times did we go through it? I think that pretty much came out right first time. I remember Rowan actually spending about 2 months or 3 months or something doing the 3D modeling around where the thumb, like the thumb holds are on either side of the mouth, and also at the back of the spoke shave as well. So, like, whether you're kind of pushing it or pulling it, doing those kind of, geometric shapes actually takes a long time to get that shape right. But the actual bottom of the spoke shave, I think that just came out first time. I don't remember ever really coming up as an issue. We just kind of had the flat bottom and then we had the round bottom. We're like, great, this works. This is comfortable, but it was just, I think that one was just a happy accident. Kind of came out right first time,
Well, and
that probably
Ben's point, to Ben's point, like spoke shaves with a rounded bottom, the more curved they are, the more difficult they are to use. And so I can remember in my past life being asked about, will you ever make a cigar shave, which is basically like a cylinder with a blade sticking out of it. And it's like, no, because in theory that works really well. But as soon as you try to there's nothing to balance, because you have to balance the front of the sole with the blade in order to get that, to do that scooping cut. And if that is too aggressive, then that you really start running into problems. And so, I mean, people think of it in a way that like, oh, well, I could get into a tighter curve. But the reality is that you're only going down into the curve, and then you got to stop, turn around and go the other way, because now you're going against the grain and it's not going to end well. But that was something that I really liked about that Ben had pointed out. And it was actually really entertaining watching Ben try the tools out, because Ben should never play poker, because
I'm a good poker player.
I don't believe that for a minute. I'll take all your money anytime you want. He would take a few swipes with the shave, and then he would stop and he would look at it, and then he'd look at the tool, and then he'd let the tool sort of fall to his side, and you could, like, his eyes were squinted the whole time. He was just looking out into space, like pondering something, and then he would try it again. And like, I watched the whole thing happen because I'm always interested in watching people's expressions and how they interface with tools, especially hand tools. I like seeing that sort of like, like that, you know what I mean? And that particular show, there was a lot of people who basically, because there was like a whole group of us just standing around talking, and people were just sort of cycling in and out of that area and like trying the planes out and doing all that stuff. And I was sort of watching it all happen, because nobody was like, I wasn't standing there watching. People were just able to enjoy it.
Be cool.
Just be cool. And so, it's good to see that sort of like little expressions of surprise, like, oh, I didn't expect it to be that heavy, or oh, this is really shaped well. And so it,
well, I don't have any stake in this conversation, but I do have a long history of being incredibly truthful. I did not realize until just now, I just looked at the website, and this is what's kind of annoying me right now, is that I did not realize that the flat bottom and the curved bottom are basically the price of any other spoke shave of note. And because I have two spoke shaves. I have a wooden spoke shave and I have a curved bottom spoke shave because I knew that I could only afford one. And I wanted to get the one that was going to do the most work. And yes, you can use a curved bottom spoke shave in most scenarios. It's a lot nicer to do some things with a flat bottom though. But I thought, okay, I can only afford one of these. I'm going to get the curve so that I don't have to buy the flat bottom. But now looking at the prices, I mean, $160 for both spoke shaves. That's a totally different set of calculus. And I never took calculus. I think that's how it works. But that's totally different. So you're really hitting a mark price-wise too that I've been to the site. I don't think it really sinks in until you really start to look at it and compare.
Well, and that's the thing. And I mean, amazingly, the best, like the tools that it's interesting. And I suppose this is probably where the whole Timbercon side of things kind of comes in and like how we've ended up with like 9. I mean, we started off, I think, with like 12, like the idea of like a range of 12 or like 13, you know, the unlucky 13. And then over time, we're like, well, you don't need that one. You don't need that one. We ended up at 9. And the
nine
like,
hand tools.
9 hand tools.
Yeah.
9 hand tools. So we got the block, the 3 benches, the 2 routers, the 2 spoke shaves, and the cabinet scraper, and that's it. And we kind of got to the 9, and I mean, we even talked about the idea of like the shoulder plane, and it's like shoulder planes they have their place, but they're a little bit too niche. Like they're not something that I guess MTC. If you're buying MTC, you generally you're working on a specific set of projects. And so like a shoulder plane wouldn't necessarily kind of fit in that toolkit. And so we kind of ended up at the 9 because I guess that history of Timbercon, you know, people tend to focus more on like the bench planes, right? But for MTC, it's the block plane, the spoke shaves, the router planes. We've only just gotten the cabinet scraper. But again, you know, like the cabinet scraper is one of those things where those sorts of tools are actually the ones that we find that people are most interested in rather than those traditional bench planes. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, my personal favorite out of the whole range actually is the low angle smoother because like a number 4 plane is kind of like the bench plane, right? Whereas taking it as a low angle version, I just find it just sits well in the hand. It functions well when, you know, in that kind of number 4 space, but it's really those spoke shaves and router planes and the block plane that are really the ones that people kind of tend to gravitate towards in the range.
Well, and the other thing that I think is that bears mentioning is that the majority of people in Australia and North America and pretty much everywhere from where I can see, everybody works in a sort of hybrid manner in that they use machinery, power machinery and power hand tools to do the bulk of the work. And then they'll grab a router plane, you know, just to tweak something. Or they'll take the machining marks off with the low angle smoother, or they'll remove the jointer marks on boards that you're going to laminate for a top, let's say, with the low angle jack. You know, you don't need like a super long plane for that, even though there is one. But it really, it's about complementing a workflow that kind of makes sense, right? There are some people who, like, it's very rare, I think, to get people who are, I only use machines or power. And you get more people who are only using hand tools. But again, that's a small sort of subsection of woodworking. Whereas I think the majority of us, like once you see a hand plane do its job, you know, I always tell people that a smoother is basically a 150-year-old random orbital sander. That's what it was used for. It was tuned up to like an inch of its life, and away it went. But I think one of the things that I find really interesting, and this is one of the things that really caught me, was the router plane, because the router plane is not, your standard, what we've come to see as a router plane. So with the L-shaped blade, right? The Melbourne Tool Company one, I mean, and you see it and you go, why haven't we always done that?
Yeah.
Why haven't we just made a bed and put a straight blade in it?
Would we call it a bevel up router?
No, it's bevel
no,
down.
It's bevel down.
But the other one's bevel up.
The other one's bevel up. Okay,
the
all right. I've
traditional
never
one
thought
is
about
bevel
this.
up.
Yeah.
But I mean, the L-shaped thing, it leads to chatter. It's difficult to sharpen. It's like, Ben, do you remember like 100 years ago when you came to one of my shops?
Yeah, I was going to say, we did a video.
We shot a video where I had to make this elaborate jig to sharpen the L-shaped blade. And it's like... You know, like, and it was great.
I have one of the elaborate jigs to sharpen the L shape, and I always pick it up because it just looks like a piece of wood, and it's like, no, I don't want to redo this. Oh my gosh, you know, like, yeah.
You showed me that, Vic, and you were like, you guys should make this and sell it, and I'm like, maybe. And that was like that was before we started doing this. And then we did the router plan. And it's like, well, we don't need that anymore,
right?
You know. But
tell you what, let's just solve the problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a, you know, for want of a better term, that's a Rowanism. Because I mean, he's an industrial designer, but I mean, he's kind of had a industrial designer, woodworking teacher, has a lot of woodworking experience, but, you know, has worked outside of the woodworking space. And so, you know, when it was like, hey, let's do a router plane, you know, he's like, well, how do you want to do the router plane? We're like, I don't know, like a granny tooth, you know, that's what everybody does, right? And he's like, yeah, but you've got all the kind of, you know, like these functional problems with it, right? And we're like, well, yeah, but that's just what everybody does.
Yeah, it's just how it's been done, yeah.
That's how it's been done. And he went and just did a whole bunch of research, you know, and that you know, chisel type, you know, is I think like 1800s, 1900s, you know, cabinet makers would kind of make their own router plane. And it would just be like, you know, an old chisel, wooden body, you know, set it all up, make it work, and that's fine. The issue there is you can't really commercialize that. And so, and you can't mass produce, you know, like a handmade wooden bodied tool. It doesn't work. And so Rowan kind of took that principle and then they, you know, commercialized it. Yeah, it's little things like he spent a lot of time on the detail work of how the fence works. You know, the fact that you can fix it in from the top. It's easy to adjust. You know, flat on one side, you can kind of unscrew it, turn it around, so you can, you know, work on curved surfaces, things like that.
Wait, the fence, the fence is in from the top?
Yeah.
The screws affix it from the top and then go down through the body and into the retainer that holds the fence in place.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. And one of them you loosen off, and you know, because it's just like a clamping screw, so you just loosen it off, and then you can slide the fence back and forth, and then just lock it in from the top with an Allen key. Yeah.
And the coolest thing about it, the next time we see each other, Ben, I'll show you how this works. But there's a special screw. So one is just designed to affix it to the body. The other one has this really cool step in the screw that basically allows it to go through, and then cuts into the bottom of the holder and then pulls everything tight, and then that's what adjusts it. But the screw has to have a very specific shape in order to do that, and I think it's genius personally. But
but you're able to adjust it like you would a fence on a electric router. Looking, you know, you can mark your line on the piece and then line everything up like you would, and then just tighten it in, as opposed to flipping it over. Hope you didn't move it while you flipped it, and blah blah. You know, like interesting.
And it's not a point. It's not a point on a bar that's holding it in place. It's actually like tightening.
It's grabbing the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like grabbing the whole shaft and clamping down on it. You cannot move it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's like, pretty nifty.
And it can't skew or anything like that. You know. So it always stays parallel to the cutter. Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot of thought that could go into, you know, simple tools.
This was how it came about, you know. Like, and this was the thing, right? Because it's like
you've said twice now, though. Like you know, there's only so many ways of holding a plane or a iron at a particular angle, but it sounds like there's a lot more than so many ways. You know, there's only so many that work, but
well, that's the thing, because like we kind of, I mean, I guess there's a lot of stuff that's been left on the cutting room floor to kind of get to where we are now as well, you know. So, but I mean, I think that's the same with every design process, you know. You go through a lot of iterations, and I mean, there was so many things. There are probably so many things that, you know, if we went back and looked at it, it would be like, oh yeah, I forgot that we were going to do that. Oh, I forgot that we were going to do that. You know, and I suppose that's what every design process is like, you know.
That'll be V2.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? So, like, we've got a wish list. I think it's mainly around the bench planes, to be honest. But there is like a little bit of a wish list of, oh, you know, we'd like to change this and we'd like to change that. And, you know, I think for the time being, we're just going to let things run. This is like a 3 years time kind of situation, because Rowan's kind of done with the MTC development in terms of the hand planes, and so he's working on other things. So rather than kind of going back over and, you know, constantly changing things, I think we'll kind of just leave things as they are now and maybe go back in 3 years and kind of revise the line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the kit of 9 tools right now, and it really is. It's for the way that most woodworkers work, and you know, it's been named hybrid all of a sudden, but I think Mike one time was like, we've just always called it woodworking. But like the way that most woodworkers work, that is, you know, if you're looking for something to true up tenons, for sizing tenons, you could use the router plane for that. It's really I think I have to ask, just because I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't, but like, do you know what the 10th will be?
There's no plans for a 10th at this stage.
You're going to hold for now.
I think for the time being, I mean, we were joking around. We're like, you know, we get to 9, like, you know, should we, like, you know, put it out there to, you know, like the wider, like put it out to MTC customers, you know, like what would be the 10th tool? What are we missing? What's the one thing you guys really like to see? Maybe.
No.
You can be the head of that campaign, Vic. You know.
No thanks. I'll pass.
You know, like we could do a referendum on it. You know, like have a yes and no camp, and like, you know, have the figurehead.
That never goes the way you expect it's going to go.
That always goes wrong. Always. Next thing you know, you're talking with a funny accent, and it's just never goes well.
I don't know which one of us has the funny accent. I think all of us think 2 are in agreement, but none of us are.
Right, exactly.
It's a Canadian, right? It's the
right.
Canadian.
Come on,
we've got our version. We've got our version of Canadians down here as well. I mean, they're called New Zealanders, so you know.
See, I love seeing things through a different perspective. This is wonderful.
You know, it's very true that like America sort of points fun at Canadians because, you know, we talk funny and we're, you know, we do things differently, and Australians do the same thing to New Zealanders. And so like New Zealanders and Canadians have this like brotherhood where it's like we secretly know that we're better than our big brothers, but we don't tell them. Except for now.
I'm just leaving it alone.
I'm entirely sure. Yeah, I'm entirely sure. Like, we're just going to get like this hate mail from like the 3 New Zealanders that are just been like, "How dare you talk about us like this?" You know,
right.
But we're just really good at appropriating all the best things about their country and claiming it as our own. You know.
Yeah, I know. As an American, I know. Okay, so you've got the 9 planes designed or whatever. You didn't design all 9 before you started manufacturing, right?
No. We rolled them out. So, I mean, there was the low angle block plane, low angle jack plane, which were kind of the first 2 to start with. So we got rolling with them, and then we just progressively added to them. But,
how difficult is it to go about getting like a new line of hand planes manufactured, though? Like,
well, it's not easy. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it, you know. But so the factory that we ended up using, they mainly actually specialize in producing machine tooling. So rather than producing, you know, completed goods, they generally can't. They're a manufacturer for machine tooling. So, like, tooling for, I don't know, plastic molds, or like jigs to use in like 5-axis CNCs, that type of product. And we basically went with them because the one of the bosses of the factory, he had a background in casting, so it's kind of casting and machining. Had a background in casting, but machined to a very high tolerance level, and so look, when you kind of look at, say, like machine tooling and look at the tolerances that are required there, it tends to cross over with hand plane manufacturing. Because the flatness of the sole and, the squareness of the wings and all of those sorts of issues, it's very similar to machine tooling. And so we approached that factory and they were quite keen on looking at diversifying, because all of their machine tooling business was domestic. They were looking for some type of export business to kind of balance out the two of them. And so that's how we ended up with that factory, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, if you're making CNC fixturing and things like that, precision is easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, and generally it has to be much higher precision than what you would ever need for a hand plane, because generally, like, you want to go to the next, like, if you're looking to create a project or a product that is good to X number of thousands, well, then your fixturing needs to be able to hold tolerances of 10,000s. In order to make sure that, otherwise you get a stacking issue that creeps in. So the fact that these folks are typically looking at 4 decimal places, that's lots for a hand plane.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah. So Vic, in your experience, like, people are able to get an MTC out of the box, hone the blade, go to work.
Yeah.
What's the QC been like for y'all?
Well, I mean, I have yet to pull a plane or a tool out of the box and have any sort of issue. So let me qualify that by saying I'm not the guy who pulls out a hand plane, whatever hand plane it is, and immediately goes at it with a straight edge or a ruler, or tries to look for things. If the tool performs the way it's supposed to perform, then it works. It's every tool maker's nightmare when you get the email that says, "Oh, I took your plane out of the box and I put a ruler on it and I could see light." And it's like, well, who made the ruler? Are you holding it correctly? And are you aware that photons are very little and they get into the darndest of places? And
that's the thing, right? Because you can see light through, 0.02 of a mil.
Right. So a millimeter, Ben, is a part of a system of measure called metric. Yeah. Oh, look at that. He's got metric. He's got a metric ruler. How nice. Anyway, Hague, he's more than used to taking crap about metric from me. So, and in some cases, he actually agrees.
Actually, a legitimate confusion comes in, because when you say a mil,
right,
to a United States American, that could be a 0.001, but you were saying to the 10th of a millimeter.
Right.
So we're even finer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, you can't, most people don't know how to check a plane properly. Most people don't have the tooling to check a plane properly. And so I've always said, like, take it out of the box. If you want to try running it without sharpening the blade, by all means, go for it. And we've interviewed tons of people who have said, I didn't even sharpen it. I just used it. And I'm like, and it was only Mark Spagnolo who said in the group that said, well, I actually sharpened mine, which I was like, oh, thank God, there's another one. But yeah, like, I mean, the blades take very little time to prepare. Pop them in. the only thing that I do, and I do this with any hand plane, doesn't matter who made it, is I will check the perimeter for any sort of like sharp spots or burrs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because those you have to get off with a quick file, and then I just follow up with a bit of emery paper, and it's good. But yeah, like you don't have to flatten things. You don't have to like like the sides are perpendicular to the sole. You don't have to play with the adjuster. You don't have to add any extra parts to it. It just works out of the box, which is all I think people want, really.
So
well, I think it's 2024. I mean, let's get serious. I mean, there is kind of this issue of taking the blade out, honing it, and preparing it, and then putting it back in, and getting going. But in 2024, quite honestly, you should be able to take things out of the box and for it just to work. I mean, I think that's a minimum expectation that people can have and should have, and that's the experience they should have. When they're buying a new tool.
Totally, Vic. We had heard Hague, who his goal for a customer was. Does that align with what you've experienced with people who are, we'll say, I'm making air quotes, hybrid woodworkers, but still looking for price as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like it can be very prohibitive for people to have to buy like the top of the line anything. And if you can get something that works well enough, then a lot of times that's what you want. Like it needs to, the tool should perform well, and it should work the way you expect it to work. And so, I mean, today's woodworker isn't strictly a woodworker, right? Today's woodworker does other things. They do metal work, they do plastic work, they do 3D printing, they do leather, they do ukuleles, right? Like I'm basically describing Ben Strano. Like woodworking's a big part, but there's other things that get done. And if you're saving up for a 3D printer or a laser or a CNC, you're not going to go and buy top of the line everything else and then like hope for the best. You want to basically be able to get the work done in a way that is acceptable, which means that the tool just works.
Yeah. Well,
right?
I was going to say, it's like, I use my hand planes consistently, a good solid once a week. Right. But I expect them to function when is it are any of them the most important tool in my life? No, but they gotta do the job.
Well, they're part of the workflow.
Well,
yes.
Yeah. But I mean, like even from our point of view in Australia, and I suppose this isn't necessarily down the path of I guess the people who most commonly watch the podcast, but when you take a step back and say look at a Timbercon customer, a relatively small percentage of Timbercon customers are like hardcore enthusiast woodworkers. We've got DIYs, we've got cabinet makers, we've got like builders, contractors. We have a full range of customers. They all happen to be working with timber, not necessarily woodworkers as such. And so the thing is, it's kind of like that idea of like simplicity, functionality, life of the tool, and this is the thing about the blades, because I mean they're an M2 high-speed steel, which is not what you'd normally find in a plane, but they hold their edge for a long time. And I suppose in Australia with like eucalyptus hardwoods, they do kind of have a bit of a problem with kind of wearing out edges. And so I mean there's a small downside with M2 and the fact that it's a little bit harder to sharpen. Like the blades are cryogenically treated, so that kind of removes that a little bit. But like the whole ethos of the tool, it does very much kind of suit the demographic of a Timbercon customer. And it's a lot broader than like that enthusiast woodworker tool too.
And as far as tool steels go, like I've used quite a few different tool steels, and they are like the M2 steel is no more difficult to sharpen, in my opinion, just from doing this for a while. I mean, obviously, high carbon steel or O1 is the nicest to sharpen, but it's also the one that fails the quickest. And so, but when you compare M2 to other alloys that get used for woodworking tools, I don't think it's any more difficult than any of the others. And so you don't need any special equipment. You don't need, like, if you use sandpaper, great. If you use diamonds, awesome. Oil stones, no problem. So it's all going to work. But what Hague says is true. Like, I've been very fortunate to travel to Australia a few times to teach, and then I always get my hands on some of these woods. And when you see some of the furniture that gets made in Australia out of these woods, you think, how did they even do it? Because it's like basically a rock that grows out of the ground, and then they harvest it.
And let's not beat around the bush. I mean, there's some woodworking happening in Australia right now. When I talk about like level of work coming out, I mean, it is
next level.
Absolutely an entirely different thing. So there is some woodworking happening in Australia.
Yeah, for sure.
Vic, let's circle back around for a minute, though, to clear something up for me and therefore probably a listener who has the question. Where does it land on a hardness, like for the tool steel that we're used to seeing? Because I don't know, like when I see M2, I don't know what that means. And when you say high-speed steel, I don't necessarily know what that means. Where is that on a range that we can... You're either ignoring me or looking something up, Vic. I can't tell. Are you mad at me?
I actually don't pay attention to those numbers because I don't really care. If I try to sharpen something, and it takes like a crazy amount of time, then I start looking things up and going, what the hell is this thing made out of?
So if we didn't name alloys at all, right, and you were working with one of the MTC blades, you wouldn't start looking at it and going, what is this?
No,
it's
I
just
would think,
as you would expect.
If I didn't know, I'd say, oh, this is probably A2.
Okay.
That's what I would, that's how it feels when I grind it.
Okay.
Like when I high speed grind it, I Tormek grind it. It has a very similar spark, and it has the same sort of feel on abrasive. It's like O1 tends to, like, you can feel it sort of mash into the grit.
What are you doing with it?
I just spending too much time thinking about it. But then A2 sort of like wants to skate on top a little bit.
Okay.
And that's the exact same feeling. As for the exact Rockwell hardness, I have no idea what the actual Rockwell hardness is. But I really don't care because in a very speedy time, I get my polish up and I just go to work.
That's what I was looking for, is like, what is the comparison?
Numbers only matter on forums, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, who cares, The
reality is, in a real world example, it sharpens well, but then it also holds its edge for a long time.
Yeah.
And people, you've always got that problem of, well, how long is that? And it's like, well, material, how it's set up, how much you're trying to take off, all those sorts of things. In a real world example, you can get like a traditional Stanley plane and use it for a while on a piece of material, and it will blunt quicker, a lot quicker than what you'd find with the MTC. Could you get twice as much life out of it? Probably not, but it's a significant improvement.
I think you do, without throwing any numbers out there. Like, just in me using it at shows and demonstrating, like, I can remember demonstrating O1 and like I would have to sharpen 2-3 times a day. And then when you're using some of the harder alloys, you might sharpen in the weekend.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
So it's a significant amount.
And it's, and I think that's just a technology thing. If you kind of look at, the technology of metallurgy back in the 1920s or whatever, and compare it to, 100 years on. I mean, everybody knows that technology has improved, so it's, and metallurgy is a very similar thing.
Well, you even look at a plane body, right? So like when Stanley, was at their heyday making their planes between World War I and World War II, like they still hadn't figured out how to de-stress the iron. And so like if you drop that plane or you hit it with a hammer, it would explode, like it would shatter. Right. But now that we've figured out ductility, ductile iron, ductile steel, like like just that alone is, when people say, oh, they don't make planes like they used to, that's correct. And thank goodness for that.
So you're giving me permission to drop a plane if I ever come over to your shop?
Yeah, sure. You can drop whatever you want. Just understand that you'll be hitting the ground before it does.
Understood. So, all right. So if a listener is sitting here and like, oh, cool, this sounds great, but I don't want to wait for a tool to come from Melbourne. I feel like I am mocking your accent when I say Melbourne the way that I'm supposed to say it. I feel like I'm.
That's our default position in Australia. We mock everything.
Okay,
it's part of the Aussie charm.
All right. So circle of trust. But so how long? Like what is shipping time? Like where are there dealers around or what? How do people?
There are dealers at the moment. There are dealers in Canada. There's stock in North America. So if you're in the lower 48 states of the US, I think it's average shipping times are like 4 days across the country.
Yeah, three to 5 days. Yeah.
Okay, so normal everyday shipping. Okay.
Yeah.
Non-Amazon shipping.
Yeah. I know they were. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's good to know too, though. Just because it's just, if it's coming from overseas, then all of a sudden you're going, oh, wait a minute, this is going to take a long time. But if they're shipping out of North America, there you go.
Right. And I mean, we've set up there's also like a North American support email and phone number. I see the emails, the phone number rings on my phone. And so if there's a problem with something, myself and Andrea are able to, take care of things. Obviously one of the things that was important to me getting involved with this was that we needed to stand behind the planes, and Hague more than facilitated that because he understands the importance of good customer service in his own business. And so this is no different. So if there's a problem, right, we're going to make it right. We're going to fix it. And I mean, it's just like that. Like we support the stuff that we're putting out there.
Right on. Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. For more information on Melbourne Tool Company's products, head on over to melbournetool.com. Of course, there will be links in the doobly-doo. Have a great one. See you next week.
Melbourne, as in the born identity.
Yes.
What do you call the born identity? The born identity?
The born identity.
And yet you say Melbourne.
Melbourne. Don't move your lips, because otherwise it lets the flies in,
Right.
Yeah. And then the spiders try
will
to eat the flies.
Yeah.